We're having another update here on our progress, and the first thing I want to show you is this floor. Charlie Podorf donated the wood pieces to create this kind of a patterned floor, and this is in the conversational area on one of the side bays, and so there'll be furniture gathered around this. It'll function almost like a throw rug, but it turned out beautifully, and we're grateful to Charlie for donating that. There's an entirely new set of storefront windows that are going in the gathering space and the old day chapel, which is now going to be the cry room. And they are constructed of metal, so they'll be much more durable and won't have to be resurfaced every few years like we did the wood. But they're a wood look, and they're, you almost have to get up and touch them before you realize that they're actually metal. But nice insulated glass, and so these are the two sides where we used to have doors. Now this is just going to be wall, and the doors are moved to the center. So this is where the doors will be. It's just sort of makeshift for the moment so that we can secure the building, but this will be two sets of double doors so that we'll still have the same number of entrances that we had before. It's just that they're moved to the center. So this will be our processional path through these doors. This processional path begins here in the gathering space, and these diamond patterns, they go all the way to the altar through the font. And so that'll be a nice directional look, but it's also, I think, very handsome. Gives a little dimensionality to the walkway. The center door is going to be much taller and larger than the two side doors now. They used to all be equal, but we wanted to emphasize that central pathway. And so you can see the framing for those center doors, and we've repeated that boxy repetitive squares which have always been a part of the church. These repetitive squares are kind of part of the original architect's design, and it's handsome, but it also kind of ties into the history of this building as well. So you'll see that they've begun to tile the baptismal font, and in the bottom there is a Jerusalem cross, and that's just a cutout from the normal black tile floor, and blue and gold mosaic pieces will be put into that cross shape, and so it should be very colorful, and it'll look really wonderful under about a foot of water. So the aisle continues on down toward the altar, and we now have the altar in, and so that's something that has been delivered for a couple of months already. It's been sitting in here waiting to be put together and installed in place, and now that has happened. So we'll have a look at that next. The altar is designed to kind of mimic what's going on in the altarpiece behind it. So you see these angles. They mimic the angles in the wood in several places on the altarpiece, so that it kind of ties in. It's all kind of a common design. The flooring on the altar platform will all be a glossy black tile, so the white limestone should look nice in contrast against that black tile. In fact, because it's a polished tile, we may even see some reflection in the floor of the shape of the altar. And we also have the ambo placed now, and it's right over here in pretty much the same place that it was before. It's also limestone, kind of mimics the shape of the altar, and it's just above the handicap ramp. There'll be a rail right here, so that people coming up to read can either come up these steps right here, or they can walk up the ramp and come behind this pillar and come around this way. So it's accessible to anyone wanting to proclaim the word. We've talked a lot about this altarpiece all the way through this process, and people have wondered what an altarpiece is, and it was kind of in my head what this should look like, but it's a little difficult to describe. And if you look online, you can see hundreds of altarpieces from Europe, but they're usually from the Renaissance period, and they're gilded frames and they're very ornate. And we had to do something that fit in this building. And so oak wood has always been a big part of this room. And so we've stuck with that oak framing, and the architect designed a very handsome structure, I think. And another thing we've talked about a lot is that we were going to expose that window, and so the stained glass is installed there, and it becomes a kind of part of the altarpiece. And this is going to be a very dynamic thing that's going to be the first thing you notice when you walk into the room. You'll be looking across the font toward the altar, but you'll also be looking at that window above the altar. It's just really going to be stunning, I think. Another thing that just got installed yesterday are the electronic hymn boards. And so Ron Frank suggested this. He and Betty had seen this in some of their travels in Catholic churches when they went to Mass. And so it gives us the ability to have much larger letters and the ability to get more explanation up there, like what hymnal we're choosing from, etc., whether it's a Mass part or a hymn. And this will be able to be controlled by a computer back in the back. So Kelly, for example, can come in on Friday and she can program these with the weekend's hymns, and then we don't have to be getting on a ladder and putting up numbers and things like that. It can all be done electronically. And so there's one on this side and one on the other side, and I think that that's going to improve our worship because people will be more readily able to see and understand what they're being asked to sing. We've done a similar style with the Thomas More Chapel. We raised the ceiling height, but we also are bordering it with these repetitive squares again, which tie in with the repetitive squares of the stained glass windows, ties in with what was happening in the old day chapel and the cry room on the other side. So the whole room kind of has that same look. And so you see here that the platform for St. Thomas More is already in place. And this is kind of hard to see because it's covered with protective material because of the paint and the staining of the wood. But that's a dark blue tile that is a backdrop, and then it's framed in that same oak. So I think Thomas More should be rather dynamic in this chapel. And the votive candles are a wall-mounted type that will be going on the two side walls. But they won't stick out very far any more than this wood framing, so they won't obscure the look of the chapel when it's all finished. So we've done a very similar treatment of the Mary Chapel. That back wall has been covered in that dark tile. We see the column that Mary is going to sit on, just stained and lacquered today. And so that should be a fitting place for the Mary statue. It should really pop in front of that dark tile. We're talking about the Mary statue that was always here, that right now is over in Utopia in the corner, but she'll be moved back here in her place. People have asked what we were going to do with the Mary statue that was outside in front of the church. And so we decided to move it over here into the columbarium area. There's a wonderful natural niche here between two columbarium walls. And so we had this limestone base built that mimics the bases of the columns all the way around this loggia, so it kind of ties into the whole area and also the wall behind it. So I think Mary looks good here, and this is going to be her permanent home.